All right, awesome. So, hi everyone. Thank you, Ann, so much. That was really amazing, and those are really the core principles of Bitcoin and decentralization that really matter, and that's what's gonna, I think, really, perpetuate this adoption and for global adoption. So, thank you for that. Yeah. So, my name is Kieran Daniels. I've been leading growth for a Web3 company called Block Native for about the last year. My presentation today is going to cover what I think are the top 3 UX challenges in Web3. But first, I'd like to share my backstory and kind of what led me to understand the critical importance of user experience in app design. All right, I just turned 33 last Friday. Happy birthday to me. It was a quiet one here in SF under quarantine, but I still had a good time. Um, I focused heavily on digital marketing and growth for the last 10 years. I left college in 2019 at the peak of the financial crisis. There were no jobs in Idaho where I was living at the time. And it made me realize it was time to hit the ground running. A side note or a caveat to this is Bitcoin was directly created in the response to the 2008 financial crisis. Satoshi, whether he's one person or whether he's a group or whether he's the CIA, we don't know, but he actually said, or she or the person said in the white paper, the root problem with conventional currency is that all the trust that's required to make it work. The central bank must be trusted not to debase the currency, but the history of fiat currencies is full of breaches of that trust. Banks must be trusted to hold our money and transfer it electronically, but they lend it out in waves of credit bubbles with barely any fraction in reserve. I'm not going to get too much into this. I invite you to read that and research it, but this is happening all over again right now. So this is a very good topic to kind of get into. Like I said, that kind of, we all went to college. We all were promised a lot of things, and then that all fell apart. So after leaving, college in 2009, I waited tables, sold cell phones for a few years, and basically self-taught through mentors and myself, all the digital marketing methods at that time. So at the time, it was SEO, affiliate marketing were the hot topics, but content marketing was emerging as a clear leader. I really liked that, identified with it, and learned a lot of that. So my knowledge and experience in content marketing led me to be recruited by an early stage SaaS startup called Instapage.com. When I joined Instapage in 2013, I was the first non-developer at the company, and we were pivoting from an affiliate marketing dashboard to a what you see is what you get type landing page builder, similar to Wix, but more focused on A/B testing and marketing funnels. We had a very small amount of seed capital, and that was very quickly squandered away. And we basically did everything you could do wrong for the first year or so. But it turns out that that's how you learn how to scale a startup. So we figured it out. And when we finally carved out our market share and hit traction, things escalated very quickly. We grew from a few thousand users to over 200,000 in about 9 months. This hyper growth was insane, but it also led to insane churn. Churn is the metric that you watch of, when new users sign up versus when they bounce from the service or they cancel the service. So churn is, you will learn if you get into SaaS or any sort of app development, that churn is the death of a SaaS company. It makes investors want nothing to do with you. It shows that, yes, you can grow, but there's something wrong and people are leaving. So that's really bad. So after some user testing and feedback, we quickly realized that users were signing up and they're excited about the product, but they didn't make it over the finish line and actually started using the product. Because of this, we spent months revamping our user onboarding flows, and we focused heavily on developing a meaningful and easy to navigate customer journey. We reduced the churn from 11% to 3.5%, and that continued to grow, which eventually led to us getting $15 million of funding from Morgan Stanley, and the company's still doing great today. So, the reason I shared all of this with you is, the key takeaway here is that user experience really matters. And this is a common trend in Web2 for the last decade. You can research all of the failed companies, and a lot of them, it had something to do with this when it comes down to it. I see this day and day, many developers, both young and old, they often completely ignore user experience and creating proper customer journey until it's too late. There's some forgiveness there, because when you're in a startup and when you're doing early development and you're a team of a couple developers or even one or more, you have prioritization issues, whether that's budget, runway, developers and whatnot. So you have to normally pick, core features. You have to pick what's gonna create the product and sell. And oftentimes onboarding and UX just completely gets ignored. But the reality is, if you ignore it too much and you wait too long, then you get all these users. And there's nothing worse than pissed off users. So if you grow and you do this thing and then they can't use the product and then they start going online, it can really, end a company. And I've honestly seen it end multiple companies. So all of this ties into the top 3 UX challenges in Web3. So I wanted to kind of, try to talk about something new today. I watched Anne's talk and she did such a great job at explaining the abstracts and the real meaning of decentralization. And I want to note on that again, please just study everything she talked about. And that's really what we're trying to do here. But on the DeFi side of it and Ethereum and decentralized finance, that's really where we can start banking the unbanked and where people can not only, get money, whether it's donations in poor countries or transfer funds, but they can start earning interest. And for the first time ever, everyone can access the financial system. And the financial system prior to this has been crooked and manipulated. And there's access gates. You have to have a broker. You have to work with a custodial service. And the entire point that you should take away from Ethereum is that third party is no longer there. So this brings a lot of new challenges because this is the new internet. Like we are building Web3, and the main difference is in Web2 you had to trust servers, you had to trust these entities, and that was required because the internet didn't exist before. So you have to first prove out a concept with centralized services to make sure that they work. So those were needed and those are trusted, but as things get bigger, that trust vanishes and stock options come into play, or stockholders come into play, and stuff starts to slip. So essentially what I would say is that we're at about 1998 in the new web. So if you were to think where we are, so what that means is the infrastructure of Ethereum and the new web is just barely being built. So, when you go to use Venmo or you go to use your app, you're very accustomed to notifications coming up. You're accustomed to just clicking one thing and signing in and it all working. But, before that user experience was developed, it took a long time for it to happen. And, there wasn't that. And it was the first web was very hard to use. So that's where we are in Web3 right now. And I just invite you as developers to really consider design and research web UX, when you're building these apps. So I'll jump right into what I think of the top 3. So the main difference between a Web3 dApp, which is a decentralized app, and a Web2 dApp, or traditional one, is the decentralized nature and the back end. If it's working with Ethereum, you have to interact with that Ethereum chain. That's the ledger, that's the back end of it. So in order to do that, you need to do a few things. And most people, even experienced people, have a hard time with this still and don't understand it. The main thing, one of the first things that comes to mind is how do you buy or acquire the initial Ether needed to use most apps? And Ether is the token that powers the Ethereum network. We'll get into gas, and you guys are probably familiar with that already, but essentially, like, you have to have Ether, or if it's, some other token in your wallet, and you have to, already have purchased that or acquired it in some way in order to interact with any of these apps. So that's an initial hurdle that you can consider everyone having. Number 2 is gas, excuse me. What is gas? We'll get into that a little bit, and what complexity layer does that add to a new user? And I encourage you to think not only about the technical aspects of them calculating and them, doing certain things, but also the abstract of the fact that you're asking people to put their money out there, and you're asking people to add more money onto something that, they already did, et cetera. And how does that make you feel? Number 3 is popping up Web3 or MetaMask immediately when a user visits your dApp website. This something that I've had a lot of experience with, and it's still overlooked by even some of the most popular dApps in the world. And basically, when you first land on a website, there's the option to, or the default configuration, it seems, in Web3 is to immediately ask for you to sign into your Web3 or wallet. This seems like not a big deal, but when you go to a new site that you already might not trust and something pops up asking you for you to sign your identity away and give them access, that's really bad from user experience. So we'll get into that. All right. So 1, buying and acquiring initial Ether. Needed to use most apps. The problem, like I said before, most apps or decentralized apps, Web3 apps, require Ether for you to use them. This can be acquired by mining, which most people aren't going to do, or purchasing it on exchanges, or being given to you, or other means. The other problem is people already don't trust crypto and blockchain, and now you're asking them to spend their actual money and, like I said, sign away their identity and whatnot. These are big asks, and people already don't trust the system. So what are some solutions? This is a very, very interesting concept, and there's, now that we're kind of emerging as a stable, I guess, industry or niche, like people are really taking this seriously, and over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of really awesome projects built. There's kind of a few trends that we're seeing emerge. One of the trends is just straight up give your users starter ether. So after they sign in and access the wallet, however you work that in the app, that you just give them enough to get going. In my personal opinion, this might be the best case for a while. I think that UX and that initial click is so important that at all costs do it. So the downside of this obviously is you have to pay for it, and how does that work out? So number two is link to an exchange or Coinbase, link to an exchange like Coinbase, or a decentralized exchange like Radar Relay or other options. This seems to be pretty much the most common thing. Is basically, when a user goes to the site, they log in, and if they don't have Ether, then it'll say, okay, go to X amount of X Relay, or sorry, X exchange. The problem with this is, you're asking a user to start over all their thinking, bounce off of your app or website, and then go do a whole other process with another company. Most people are just not going to do it, and that's proven in the data. And then number three is integrate a service like link drop, and I'll try to present this. Hopefully this goes full screen, but I'll just touch on it real quickly here. Link drop, this is a young team. They made a really cool concept, which I really identified with. And basically, you're allowed to, or it allows you to just send links, hot links to people that automatically onboard them into MetaMask. So I'll let you guys kind of check this out on your own. But I wanted to note that there are, actual, separate apps and separate niche solutions that are coming out to kind of fix these problems already, which is exciting. I'm not sure if I might have to navigate. Sorry, guys. All right, sorry about that. There we go. All right, number two, gas. So Ethereum gas, by definition, is a few things. Ethereum gas is a unit that measures the amount of computational effort that it will take to execute certain operations. Two, every single every single operation that takes part in Ethereum, be it a transaction or smart contract execution, requires some amount of gas. Miners get paid an amount in Ether, which is equivalent to the total amount of gas it took them to execute and complete an operation. I think you guys are already familiar with that, so I won't get into it. But the main problem here is that gas is a new and confusing concept on top of multiple others. And that's pretty much it. Like if they've gotten to the point where they've already signed into a Web3 wallet, they've decided to trust you, they're going to make a transaction, then you click it, and then you're introducing, completely new concept, asking them to spend more money. You're introducing them into different variables, such as number two, gas must be calculated based on the current network conditions. Whether there's congestion, it'll be higher, which will slow down the transactions, which will create another huge problem, which is, just waiting for things to happen without any notifications. So basically, there's a lot of understanding that to someone that already understands, it seems trivial, but really, when you do use your feedback with new users, it's just user experience ending. So what are some of the solutions? The abstract is, the number one solution is just abstract the gas by simply paying it for your users. This is kind of similar to the acquiring Ethereum concept. Is if you have a DApp, and if you want, like, what is your customer acquisition cost essentially? Like, how important is it to you that they use it? So in my opinion, I'm on the more extreme spectrum. I think that this should be included in any customer acquisition cost if you can't figure it out in another way. And what it does is it just abstracts it completely. A big takeaway I want you to get from this is people don't need to understand blockchain. And the reality is they shouldn't. Like, when you go to send an email, you don't need to understand STMP and how CDNs work and all these different servers, and you shouldn't, and most people probably don't. So that's a really good example to think about. Like, we're getting excited about all these technical concepts with blockchain, but the reality is this stuff's really confusing, and it's super cool for us. But in my opinion, the goal here is for us to just abstract this all the way from the user and really teach them the concepts of decentralization and like what Ann was saying, like, sovereign identity and sovereign finance. So yeah, another option, number 2, is add the gas on top of the TX and explain that to the user. So I've seen this a few times, and this also works. Basically, you would do the initial transaction and then just add that grouped into the cost of the transaction, and then notify them through the UI and the UX. There's a bunch of different technical ways to do that. There's that. And then number 3 is a hybrid model, which is pay. And we're just starting to see this emerge. A really, really cool app that I invite you to check out, which is a wallet, is called Ethereum. And basically they decided to pay for a set amount per month. So I'm not going to click it to their blog post so I don't screw the presentation, but just Google Ethereum and free transactions and check that out and read it. And I'll follow those notes after. But essentially what they do is they explain to the users, the concept of this, and they give them 10 free transactions per month. And what this does is kind of minimize the risk and the scaling issues and the abuse possibility, and then give users enough transactions for most people to get familiar with it, do what they need to do. And then if they need more than 10, then, most people will be comfortable paying for that. I really like this model and I support that. All right. Number 3, so this is what I was talking about, popping up the Web3 MetaMask immediately when your user visits your DApp website. I don't have a demo for this, and I'm not going to switch off, but basically most apps you go to will do this, and I'll add that presentation in the future. But my main points here are: don't do this, number 1. Number 2, don't do this. Number 3, and it's easy to not do this. I work for a company called Block Native, and one of our products is called Onboard.js, which I'm going to talk about. And it's free, open source, but really that product was created out of this need. It's not even kind of our core focus, but it's so bad that, when you actually go to most of these sites, you're immediately asked to pop up. You're immediately accosted essentially by a Web3 wallet asking for your identity, asking for you to commit to something you don't know, and asking you for, to use your money. So the reality is this will drastically decrease conversions or a sale or an action, and most users will bounce right out of this. So there's a bunch of different solutions for this, and that's why I said it's easy to do. First of all, just don't call the Web3 function until a user takes an action, which is, clicks a button or visits a certain page. And a lot of really polished apps and a lot of people do this, and this is pretty much what everyone should be a standard I recommend, and the easiest solution is that instead of allowing the default a Web3 call when you first load that page and it pops up and scares people, wait until they navigate through and build trust and understand it, and then when they actually click a button where they need to interact with the wallet and they're going to make that choice, then pop that up, and that'll align the user flow. That simple thing could be millions of dollars once we start getting a bunch of users on this. Number 2, prompt the user to sign in the Web3 MetaMask as their first action, but with a guided tour. I also like this a lot. A lot of DEXs and a lot of other dApps will do this, and the theory, or I guess the psychology with this is, none of the users are going to do anything without first integrating with their wallet. So if you do anything before that, then it doesn't really matter. So the idea is to just ask them to do the first thing while you have their attention. But instead of just popping up MetaMask right when they hit a page, what you should do is, I recommend, is making a nice UI, guide them through a tour, whether you do interactive stuff, whether you do a video, that'll all work. And then the third thing is why we created this open source project, which I invite you to check out. It's totally free to use, open source, and it's called Onboard.js. And essentially what Onboard is it's just an open source framework for Web3 onboarding to Ethereum. So what this means is, instead of when you click a button and call the Web3 function and you're just popped up with MetaMask, what this allows you to do is select between multiple wallets. It allows you to change networks and allows you to do a lot of things. What the thing is we don't want to control any of that. The company doesn't want to control any of that. So actually what it is it's an open source framework that the dApp developer can choose which wallets they want to show, whether they've been tested or not, and whatnot. So I'll give you, and then I'd like to end today. I want to show you, I think my screen should be still sharing. So this is just a demo that we built, and this is a cool way for me to kind of show you everything that we were talking about very quickly instead of going to some, partners of ours and showing how bad their UX is. So basically this, you can ignore the UX here, but essentially what these buttons are here is what would happen when you click to transact. So pretend you were going to a DApp and it says, purchase Ether or whatever the action is. Sorry, I'm going to reset the wallet state. So pretend that you've just, you want to go to a DEX and you want to trade some Ethereum and do that. So you've landed on the DEX page and you click make a purchase or whatever the action is. When you click that, normally MetaMask would pop up if they've done that, or it would have hit them right away in the page. And that would have, they would have, if they know it, great. If not, it would have scared them away. What Onboard allows you to do is pop up this screen, and the dApp developer can show which ones are here. So you could have just MetaMask, you could have just hardware, you could show multiple, and then we added below the fold type thing too. So if you have untested wallets or whatnot, you can add that. Little bit, what is a wallet? A wallet is used to send, receive, store digital assets like Ether. Wallets come in many forms. They're either built into your browser, an extension added to your browser, a piece of hardware plugged in your computer and your app, your phone, etc. So this is cool, and you don't need to necessarily use this or not, but it shows the functions that you can do. And with simple things like this, like it really, increases the overall user experience, and it allows users to gain that trust and to kind of cross the finish line. And that's just, if there's any takeaway from this, like that's really the biggest hurdle here is education and understanding. People don't understand what money is right now. And that's the biggest problem. A lot of people, tons of people think that the dollar is still backed by gold. It's backed by the military. So when it comes down to defense when it comes down to decentralized finance, it's really important, to get in the hands of people, and the user experience is honestly more important than the features, if you ask me. If they can't use these products and all these cool things that we're trying to build to save the world, then it doesn't really matter. So yeah, thanks so much for that. Thanks so much for the time and having me here. Please reach out with any questions after this. My Twitter is Kieran Kyle. I love to talk to people, and I would love to help you. And if anyone has any questions at all, please reach out, and I'll talk to you again.
Thanks again. Could you stop the sharing on your screen, please?
Yeah.
So while you're doing that, I just wanted to tell the class, remember, at the beginning of the semester, I said that there are very many opportunities to start your own companies and not just to join a company. My basic formula is find a problem and fix it. I think Kieran talked about some very pragmatic situations. I had a class last year who said, well, let's do voting on campus. Let's vote for all of our student representatives using blockchain. I said, yeah, you go right ahead and try that. The blockchain part is the easiest part. How are you going to register students to vote? If you tell them all you got to do is get MetaMask on your phone with this and that, they're going to look at you and say, you're out of your freaking minds. And so these are the real problems with blockchain, not the blockchain core technology. And the user interface, the user experience, Kieran, you are right on. I totally agree with you. There are so many problems to be solved to make this addressable. And I, again, completely agree. Blockchain today is an adolescent. It's a teenager. It's like the internet was 20 years ago. There's so much more we can do, and you're the guys that are going to invent it. So thank you again, Kieran, and please send your slides if you haven't already, so that I can post them to the class website. Any questions for Kieran, class? There's a bunch on the chat window. Let's see. But that's mostly the end. So come on, don't be shy. We got and I guess they're going to be shy.
I mean, if you guys have any questions about Web 2 growth or anything like that too, or anything with Web 3, I know it's always hard to be put on the spot, but this is kind of a really thing that I'm trying to like champion. And it just as a developer, if you come to the table with this, whether you're starting your own project or if you come to an already developing company, you're going to get a lot of respect, and they're going to really understand that. So yeah, just ask away, like any questions you have, because user growth is really it's the elephant in the room right now in Web3. People will say how blockchain is doing awesome and everything, that's great, but the reality is there's not many users, and no one wants to admit that or say it, but this is the main issue. So
it's only early adopters, and if you want to get to the mass, the mass adopters, you got to invent a lot. And it doesn't have to be that hard to do, but just have to think about, get rid of that phrase, all the user has to do is, because the user doesn't want to do jack. So take that phrase away, you got a success. Thank you again, Kieran. We're going to move on to our.
Do you know any example? What's like the best example of UX in the blockchain space right now, in your opinion?
Oh man, that's a great question. That should be, I'm kind of put on the spot. Ziggis, do you have, can you help me out here, or,
Or what would you like to see in, like, from us as students in terms of like projects possibly?
The reason that's a hard question to answer is because my mind is so filled with all of these crazy, brilliant projects that are all coming out like right now. And I just really mean that. Like Ziggis and I talk all the time, like it's just every day there's this new DeFi project with a new core concept that literally, that saves people or that helps people or whatnot. So, it's hard for me to answer that, but I would just, I guess the best thing is just to spend a lot of time just using these systems. Like that's still what I do. I consider myself like an expert, I guess, but I don't. Like the people, always surround yourself with smarter people, and the people that are around me are talking about things that I have no understanding of. And I just constantly am learning. So I guess, this is a new presentation for me, but that's really good feedback. I'm going to add examples and do demos, but I guess I encourage you to go use these products. Some of them are on testnet, but you might have to get a little bit of ether and spend it, but it's worth it. Go in and use things like Set Protocol, check out things like Zerion, which are a DeFi dashboard, which will show you all the redeemable DAI you can get, all those different things. I would recommend going and using DEXs, going and using aggregators, look at like Total, look at 1inch Exchange, look at Radar Relay. And then a bunch of other cool stuff like Set Protocol is another really amazing example of an interesting concept. You can basically use ether to buy into different strategies and sets of trading, and you allow others, or you based on a certain algorithm or whatever to handle your assets. So for a lot of people that's really important. So yeah, just use and practice and try everything and ask questions. That's my best advice.
All right.
Do you think mobile apps have like some type of advantage in this user experience and connecting people to the blockchain?
I'm personally very jaded with the answer to that question because I come from Web2, so I'm mobile first, like at any cost. You know what I mean? Like there's obviously needs for for browser app. And a lot of that right now is necessary. Like a lot of these things have to be in browser for whatever technical reason or whatnot. But in my opinion, if you can do mobile, and the future is mobile, and if you're not designing for it or you don't have it, you'll probably fail. So it's best to optimize for that first and to think about that first. For many reasons too. It's not just that, like we're all, we all are very fortunate with where we live and our, affluence and whatnot, even if we consider ourselves broke, but a lot of people don't have access to computers or internet or whatnot, and a mobile device is like all they have. So that's a big deal for decentralized finance, because really, this is cool for us if we can have bank accounts. Like probably most of us here have a bank account, I would assume. And that's like a big deal because most people in the world don't have a bank account. Like you don't have an identity, then you can't use finance. So yeah, I think that's important.
Okay, gonna have to cut it off here.